On behalf of EngagementB2B.com, I want to welcome you to our lecture series, which is entitled The Essentials of B2B Value-Based Marketing. In today's session, we're going to take a look at the question, how do you build an economic customer value model? If you may recall from our last episode, we talked about the variety of tools that marketers can use to assess customer value. We concluded by saying that you needed to triangulate, meaning use several tools in order to come up with an overall view of customer value. Today we're going to take those findings and aggregate them into a customer value model. Hopefully this can be expressed on a single piece of paper or laptop screen that makes it easy for you to communicate the superior value of your offering. Hi, my name is Jim Naris. I'll be today's speaker. If you need to reach me via email, you can at engagementb2b@gmail.com. Let's start with a basic question. Assume that you're a purchasing or supply manager for a major company and you've been asked to go out and find a new product for the company. You looked at all the alternatives and boiled them down to two, and you want to answer the basic question, which is economically superior, product A or product B? That's going to be the focus of our modeling today. Now, to answer that question, I'm going to take you back in time to your college days. During Economics 101, I'm sure you were introduced to this gentleman, Mr. Adam Smith. His classic book, The Wealth of Nations, was published in 1776. If you look through that document, you'll see this phrase, value in use. What is value in use? Well, Adam Smith basically said value in use captures the economic superiority of one product over another product. So basically what he's saying is that when you put all of the factors together, how is one product superior to another economically? Now, the formula that we're going to use for that is listed below, VIUAB, which means the value and use of product A versus product B, is equal to the difference in value, value A minus value B, minus the difference in price, price of A minus the price of B. Now, we'll come back in a minute and explain this, but obviously what you're doing is you're putting all of the economic factors together and coming up with a single measure, value in use, which captures everything you need to know succinctly. Now, why do you use value in use? Well, we're going to show you in a while that that's the basis of your product's value proposition. All right, now in our previous works, Jim Anderson and I have focused in on what's referred to as the fundamental value equation. Now, what is the fundamental value equation? Well, if you go all the way back to the first lecture where we talked about Warren Buffett, and you recall Warren Buffett said, price is what you pay, value is what you get. We concluded that the two things you want to look at in economic considerations are the value and the price. The value being what the customer gets, and the price is what the customer has to give up. And we're going to conclude that in deciding between two products, if the value of A minus the price of B is greater than the value of B minus the price of B, then we're going to choose product A. So everything we discuss is basically going to be drilled down from these formulas. All right, now the fundamental value equation has some important implications. The first of which is the idea of customer incentive to buy, which is a classic Michael Porter term. What is the customer incentive to buy? Value A minus price of A. So obviously, if what you get is significantly greater than what you have to give up, you're going to buy that product. So there's a big incentive there to buy that. Now, Michael Porter says that in fact, customer incentive to buy is the basis of all marketing strategies. Just think about this for a minute. You got three choices. As with many selling situations, when I run into customer resistance, what's the first thing? Well, there's a tendency to lower price. So I keep the value the same, I lower the price, which again increases the customer incentive to buy. Well, a lot of companies today are limiting a salesperson's ability to lower price. If I can't lower price, then I add value. So when I run into this resistance, I add things onto the pile, which in essence makes the difference between value and price greater. You know, a good example of this is that when I shop online, most of the vendors provide products with free delivery. Well, free delivery is not free. It's an added value that they're giving to me to, in fact, expand this customer incentive to buy. All right, now a customer will prefer offering A when the value of A minus the price of A is greater than the value of B minus the price of B. So obviously I'm getting more from product A than I'm giving up. And then lastly, which is an important insight, is that if I don't know what the value the customer gets from either product, then the customer incentive to buy reduces to price A, price B must be less than price B. All right, now that's important because if I can't talk value, then all I have to talk about is price. All right, now we're going to go over a series of steps in the economic customer modeling process. So let me just run through these steps now, and I'll come back and tackle them one-on-one. We start with a list of all price, cost of use, and benefit elements for a type of product. We configure our solution and identify the incumbent or next best alternatives who are going to be our competitors. We evaluate points of parity, points of contention, and points of difference. We focus our analysis on relevant points of difference. We write a word equation for each benefit, cost of use, and price element. We also list non-quantifiable elements as placeholders. And then lastly, we create a value model spreadsheet in which we specify our data and assumptions. All right, let's run through these. All right, where do I begin? I take out a big sheet of paper and I list all price elements that my customer is going to have to deal with when buying my product. So let's start with a car as a simple example. The price elements that you would list would include things such as the suggested resale price, state and local taxes, dealer preparation fees, additional features, deals, and discounts, among many, many other things. So you want to be exhaustive here. And you see the following little tidbits here. We start with suggested resale price, which is what you see in the catalog and online. In B2B, we rarely pay suggested resale price. It's the point for the start of negotiations. Now, from the suggested resale price, we subtract elements, and that could be things like deals and discounts, or we add to the price in terms of additional fees or additional features and so on. What we end up with when we have our exhaustive list is what's called the invoice price, which is basically a sheet of paper that says pay this amount. I start with price because that's where customers typically start, is with the price. All right, now unfortunately the price is not the only element of cost that I'm going to have to deal with. There's going to be some costs of use or additional expenses that I incur over time. Now, the classic way of explaining this is in this little iceberg model that's you can see at the top right. Now, this is comes from operations where they use the expression total cost of ownership iceberg, and it basically relates to an iceberg. If you saw the movie Titanic or have read about icebergs, you know that anywhere from a quarter to a third of the iceberg is above the surface, whereas 2/3 to 3/4 is actually below the surface. And this typically is what happens in not only B2B but B2C products. Many, many customers only see the price, which is above the waterline, when in fact the definitive factor is the annual costs of using the price, which are below the waterline. So one of the things that we're doing in value-based marketing is to expose the customer to the cost of use, those expenses that are below the waterline. So going back to our car example, what would typical cost of use elements be? Well, things like fuel, insurance, maintenance, annual property taxes, replacement parts, and so on. So I want to summarize all of the costs of use. Right now, obviously, no one buys a product merely to incur expenses. I buy it because of benefits. So I want to make a lengthy list of the benefits, both tangible and intangible. So if I'm buying a car for, let's say, my salesperson, the benefits that he or she might get include convenience, flexibility, status. From a company standpoint, it's going to allow them to make more sales calls and generate more revenue. So I want to list all of the benefits. So in the first step, I list all of the price, cost of use, and benefit elements, and I come up with an exhaustive list. All right, now, next, what I need to do is to configure the solution that I'm going to offer to my customer, all the elements that they're going to get. And at the same time, I want to identify the incumbent brand, that is the product that the customer is currently using, or perhaps the next best alternative that's on the market. Now, I do this for an important reason, and that is simply that people are generally bad at making absolute judgments. They're very good at making relative judgments. So when it's time to decide product A or product B, I sit them side by side and make a comparison. In psychology, this is often referred to as anchoring versus adjustment. I look at a reference point or benchmark and I contrast it with my option to see if it's better or worse. So what are you going to sell to the customer, and who's the incumbent brand or best alternative? All right, now, when I went through step one, I came up with this exhaustive list, and that perhaps makes a lot of people fearful about the job. Well, in fact, it's not as difficult as you might think. The next step in the process is to identify what we call points of parity, points of contention, and points of difference, the items listed to the left of this grid. A point of parity is an element which is basically the same across your product and your competitor's product. There's no difference between the two. Now, whereas most marketers want to argue that their products are clearly superior, when you talk to purchasing or supply managers, they'll tell you, hey, these products are more or less the same. So on what dimensions are you identical to your competitor? Now, if you're selling a commodity, pretty much so everything is going to be the same. The only differentiator is going to be the price. So what are the points of parity? Points of contention refer to those elements where you say you're better, the other guy says they're better, and there's no evidence that proves one way or the other. In marketing, the government allows us what's called puffery, which means that we can say our product is greater as long as there's no tangible evidence one way or another. So I want to argue that you need to determine what elements you say you're better, what your competitor says you're better, and I would argue you need to send these to the lab and get down the difference nailed down specifically. And then lastly, or what I hopefully refer to as the gold nuggets of value-based marketing, and those are points of difference. These are elements where one product or the other is clearly superior. Now, obviously, I would like to find as many superior points of difference favoring my product as I can, but realistically, there are going to be some things that my competitor does better than me. Now, why is that the case? Well, if they didn't do something better, they wouldn't be in business. So what are the superior points of difference? Now, long term, we're going to key in on the points of difference because that's what gets a customer to buy. But each one of these three elements has a role to play. For example, points of parity turn out to be critically important in the beginning stages when I'm selling a new-to-the-world product or entering a new market, because there's high risk associated with switching brands, and what I need to do is prove to my customer that they won't be any worse off than they are now. The way I do that is by recounting points of parity. All right, now you can see that there are two columns here, desirable and relevant, which means that I want to focus in on only those points of parity, contention, and difference which are relevant. And then the second column is deliverable and profitable, meaning, if I can't actually provide that to the customer and generate a profit, why waste the time on those? So I start off with a long list of price, cost of use, and benefit elements, and I boil them down to a handful, and what you're going to find out is that the points of difference more often than not come down to 5 things. So what I'm going to do is focus my attention on the points of difference. All right, now for each of these elements that I decide to evaluate, what I'm going to do is write a word equation. Now, a word equation summarizes how I determine the superiority of one product versus another in as easy a set of terms as is possible. So for example here, I've got air conditioning cost savings incumbent versus the new system, and I said that that's basically the product of several things. The electricity cost of the incumbent per day times the number of days the system is used, minus the electricity cost of the new system per day times the number of days that that system is used, so that the difference here are the cost savings that are generated by using less electricity. Now you might say, why do I need to go through this exercise? And the reason is that in B2B you're going to be making a presentation of cost savings to purchasing and supply managers as well as engineers, and they're going to want to know how you did that calculation. So I need to be able to quickly and succinctly express how it is that I did that calculation. All right, now the point that we made previously is that there are going to be some non-quantifiable elements. In our previous presentation, we referred to these as perceived value elements. So things that are important to the customer that I can't put a number on. And we're not going to throw these away, particularly if they favor our product. We're going to list these as placeholders. And some of these, for example, in the case of a car, might be status, sex appeal, aesthetics, brand equity, and popularity. So again, I'm going to keep track of them, and maybe I'll go back and do a more rigorous assessment to hopefully put some numbers to them. All right, now what I want to do is to create a customer value model spreadsheet. And the value model is going to key in on these 5 rows. Cost savings that I get from my product, extra benefits from my product. If you sum cost savings and extra benefits, you end up with superior value. And then from that, I'm going to subtract differential price, and I'm going to end up with value in use. So once again, as in Adam Smith's Value of Nations book, I'm going to come up with one number that captures all of these. All right, now here's a very simple example of what a customer value spreadsheet would look like. The important thing, if you go to the right, is that there are 3 columns. The columns represent the costs or benefits for product A, product B, and most importantly is the difference. So I'm going to subtract those 2 sets of costs for each product, and I'm going to come up with the difference. The difference is the thing that I'm going to tout. All right, the first section deals with cost savings. How do I calculate cost savings? Well, it's the cost of product B minus the costs of product A. And obviously it's a cost savings, meaning that if I'm selling product B, the customer is going to incur this less set of expenditures. So you can see the costs for A and B laid out, and then we subtract them to get the difference. So the total cost savings in this example are $45. All right, to that I want to add the extra benefits, which are, could be in the form of profits or additional sales. So I've got 2 rows here, profits from additional jobs and profits from cross-selling. I've got them for product A, product B, and more importantly, I calculate the difference here and sum them up, and I come up with extra benefits. So here I'm saying that product A delivers $180 worth of extra benefits over product B. Now, to calculate delta value, going back to the Adam Smith model, I simply add up cost savings and extra benefits, and here it comes to $225. Next, I have my value placeholders, which again are these intangible value elements, and here I've got sustainability, brand recognition, and ease of use. And, some of them may favor product A, some of them may favor product B. Because I can't monetize them, I either put plus minus or plus minus, which tells me who's superior, who's inferior, versus where there might be some indifference. From this, I'm going to subtract my differential price, and that's pretty straightforward. The price of A minus the price of B is the differential price. Typically, if you're selling a higher value added product, your price is going to be higher. So the differential price here is $15. You subtract 15 from 225 and you end up with a value in use of $210. So more formally, the value in use of product A versus product B here is $210. So when you put everything together economically, product A is $210 better than product B. Now, for comparison purposes, I've listed the value in use of product B versus A, which turns out to be negative $210. So basically what that means, obviously, is that if product A is superior to product B, then product B is inferior to product A. Now, this may look like a very complicated task. It's only difficult at the beginning, the first time you do this, because once you have this all laid out, it's just a question of doing it again and again. Now, what can I do with this? Well, I can write a series of algorithms for each one of these points and create a laptop model, or even better yet, a smartphone app, which my salespeople can use when they go into a customer plant or operations center. Rather than giving a canned presentation, I can work with them to calculate the superior value of my product. Now, the advantage of doing this is that you add credibility, because if a customer is involved in these calculations, they're more likely to believe them. All right, now, the model is a great jump-off point for strategy, and I'm summarizing this here in my colleague Das Narayandas' paper, where he describes the value stack. The value stack represents all the elements of value that your product creates relative to others. And you can see three colors here to the left: green, yellow, and red. At the top, you have big blocks, which means there's significant value created. We refer to those as shattering value, meaning that if I present these to a customer, it's likely to be enough to get them to buy my product. Now, why do I need to know the shattering value? Because that should be the basis or foundation of your value proposition. Now, next are a series of small yellow discs, and we refer to these as value chips. Why? Because we use these in negotiations with the customer as bargaining chips. So if they're not convinced, we toss these things in along the way and hopefully push them across the line so they buy our product. Now, at the bottom, you see some big red discs there, and basically these are called value drains or value leaks. To this point, our assumption is that our product creates value. Well, in fact, it might not create value. It might actually reduce value. A value drain is something that we're doing as a supplier that actually increases customer costs needlessly, and a value leak is something that the customer does which needlessly increases their costs. So basically what I want to do is to create a value model and hopefully eliminate those value elements that are either drains or leaks. Now, what I do in those cases is I eliminate them, reduce the costs of the product, and reduce the price. Now, I would argue that there's no customer out there that's going to get mad at you if you tell them that you're going to lower their price. All right, if you want to read more about value-based modeling, then I suggest our books, Value Merchants and Business Market Management, which you can obtain online from Amazon or other fine retailers. If you want to know what research Professor Stewart and I are up to these days, and in particular our findings, you can find them on engagementb2b.com, which is our research website. I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to our presentation. Next time, we're going to talk about how you construct potent value propositions.